thank you both for being here. I'm honored. I'm going to start out with my introduction. This program is a co-presentation of the City of Albany, the Alameda County Library, and the Albany FilmFest with support from Friends of the Library. So Congresswoman Barbara Lee, my goodness, I'm so honored that you're here, absolutely honored, is a true pioneer on behalf of racial and economic justice who raised two sons as a single mother on food stamps, cut her teeth as a community worker for the Black Panther Party, and was the lone vote in opposition to the authorization of military force after the September 11th attacks. Representative Lee is a former member of the Congressional Black Caucus and is the highest ranking African-American woman in the US Congress. Peabody Award-winning filmmaker Abby Ginzberg has been producing compelling documentaries about race and social justice for over 30 years. In addition to directing this amazing film, Truth to Power, she has recently released Waging Change in 2019, a documentary about the challenges faced by tip servers forced to rely on tips and the federal tipped minimum wage of $2.13. And then They Came for Us in 2017 about the connection between the incarceration of Japanese American women during World War II and the current Muslim travel ban. And I am Lisa Harris. I direct social justice services for the Alameda County Library. I am a child of East Oakland. I was raised and baptized at the Allen Temple Baptist Church, of which I know you're a member. And I am more than honored to be here to talk to you about this amazing film, about your amazing life, about all that you have done. When my colleague Paul asked me to chat with the both of you, because he knew I'd been feeling a bit down about the state of the world, he said, when you watch this film, you will be infused with hope. And that is certainly true. Hope and inspiration. So Ms. Ginzberg, I'm going to start out with you. What motivated you to make this film at this time?
I needed hope and inspiration. So that was it. That's who I make films about, are people who give me hope and inspiration. And I have to say, I started, or at least the idea for the film, I started even before Trump was elected. So I did not have any idea how important, I mean, I knew Barbara Lee inspired me. I wanted to share her story with a broader audience. I felt like if she would let me, even her constituents would learn something about her that maybe they didn't know. So, my goal was to tell her story in a way that would lead others, both in her constituency and beyond it, to be inspired by her as I have. And I was just saying earlier that, when I started this film, it was before the election of 2018. So we did not have a large number of women of color, particularly young women of color, who were in Congress. And so that was something I did not foresee coming. And Barbara had done a lot of work on the ground to help many of those people get elected. So the actual situation when the film was released was better than when it was when I started. But part of my goal was to say, look at what Barbara Lee has done. Look what she's been through. You too can consider a life in public service if you use Barbara as your role model. But I just want to say one last thing. So it was all about hope and inspiration for me. What I did not anticipate was how this film, and sort of following Barbara around like a little puppy dog, would help me survive the Trump years. Because as you say, the level of despair and anxiety and just, disruption that those 4 years caused, all across the country. What anchored me and what saved me was that I had hitched my star to one of the fiercest fighters and opponents of everything that man stood for. And so I was able to wake up every day and go to work and feel somewhat enthusiastic about what I was doing in spite of everything that was going on around the world. So let me just say, it was a good call on my part to hitch my star to Barbara's wagon.
Absolutely. Well, Representative Lee, I have followed you thank you for that. I followed you for many years since I was a child. Of course, the moment when you came into my adult consciousness was when I had two small children and was worried about the state of what would become of all of us on September 11th. And you took that courageous stand that cemented you in the minds of everyone from our communities. And it gave us some hope that things were not going to be as bad as they seem. So where did you find that hope?
Well, personally, so thanks for inviting me to be with you. And just to you personally, let me just say, I am so happy you've been my constituent all your life.
Absolutely.
And a member of my church, and you're doing amazing work in Albany. And Albany has always been in my district. And I tell you, Albany and my entire district in Alameda County is still the most progressive and the most enlightened district in the country, even though we have many of the same challenges that Mississippi has. And so, poverty rates, really unhoused people that we have to make sure get shelter, just all the issues in my district are manifested throughout the country. But we have so many creative solutions, and Albany has been right in the mix and in the middle of creative solutions.
I want to tell you exactly, so that I want to tell you exactly what I do. So I'm a social justice, librarian for incarcerated youth.
Oh boy.
And adults. So I work with youth detained at the Alameda County Justice Center and also with adults at the Santa Rita Jail. We do services to the homeless, services to new immigrants. And so a lot of what we're doing here, I shared with Abby earlier that I teach a class on social justice and organizing for the youth at the Juvenile Justice Center. And so I can't wait to show them this film. I can't wait to show them that there is some hope out there. But I want to hear you say more about your courageous decision after 9/11.
Well, first, let me just say to you, Abby's heard me say this again, but since she said she followed me around like a puppy dog, she followed me around like a bulldog and to get me to do this film. And I love bulldogs. My son has two. But she just really was so persistent. It took her twice as long to do this film. And I don't think I ever agreed to it, but this is what happened, thanks to Abby.
I love it. So glad you did. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. But secondly, just in terms of hope and inspiration, again, I try to share with people. Now, I realize the pain of the moment and how hard things are for people, and how exhausted people are, and how in many respects, a lot of people are depressed and have been for years. COVID has just exacerbated this.
Absolutely.
But in the film, I try to make the point that I almost didn't get here because of racism. My mother almost died in childbirth. I mean, it's like, and I had to fight here to get out, to live, to breathe. And so I have no option. And when you look at the history and when you look at what Black women, especially in this country, have had to endure, Lord knows, I wouldn't be here today alive if it hadn't been for those struggles of Black men and Black women and our allies who have paved the way and shattered so many barriers. And so I would be doing a disservice if I felt down, if I didn't feel like there was hope, because they believed there was hope. And I believe there's hope. And so, I understand the reality. I was a psychiatric social worker by profession. So I realize what's taking place. And I try to encourage people, you have to deal with self-care and your mental health and all the issues that are affecting you personally. But use some of this time when you're feeling down to see what's happening in your life to try to help others. And that's what I tried to do throughout my life when I was down and out. Former victim of domestic violence, raising kids on public assistance, abortion, just stuff. And by the grace of God and hard work and the love of my family and a few friends, I got through that. But you know what? I said, if I get through this, I'm going to do everything I can do to make it better for the next person or the next woman who comes this path. And so I landed in public office, and that's what I got to do, is make sure I fight for justice and to dismantle these systems of injustice, which are prevalent every single place in our society.
Amen. Yes. One of the things that I think it was Van Jones who said that you are not the typical politician. The typical politician says, I do this for you and you write me a check. And as I bandied about this morning and asked a few people, should I call her Congresswoman Lee or Representative Lee? I came upon Representative Lee because you really, it strikes me that you really embody the best of representative politics. You have been proximal to the pain, as you say in your in the film, and I think Ayanna Pressley spoke to this. So you are now proximal to the power. And I think that is really the best that we can hope for, that you take our concerns and you go back to Washington. And that gives me hope. It really does. I'd like to hear, I want to go back to that 9/11 moment. What was that? What gave you that strength? And I have to tell you, I remember being at church and hearing Pastor Smith talk about that moment and all that was going on there. So I really want to hear what you were thinking.
Well, Lisa, first of all, just with regard to what to call me, I'm a proud representative of my constituents, but my mother told me a long time ago, I was born Barbara and I'm gonna die Barbara.
I love it. I love that moment.
So that's who I am.
Thank you. Thank you. Absolutely. Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Yeah, and what happened as a result of 9/11, I was sitting, first of all, in the Capitol that morning. Very few people in the Capitol that early, but I was in there doing my work with Sheila Jackson Lee, former Diane Watson, and I think it was the administrator of SBA, trying to fight with them to do more business with minority and women-owned businesses. I'll never forget that. So I had heard a loud noise, people calling me from my office saying, get out of that building, get out of the Capitol. The Capitol Police saying, evacuate out. There weren't, again, very few of us. And so I ran out of the building, not knowing where I was going. Of course, and the story, let me just go back to January 6th, because I was on the floor, knew something was going to go down. I had on heels on 9/11, but I wore tennis shoes on January 6th. Because it was hard running up Pennsylvania Avenue.
Absolutely, yes.
But I ran up and looked back and I saw this smoke. And that was the Pentagon where the plane had crashed. I didn't know that. And so on flight 93, we learned later was coming into the Capitol. On flight 93 was Wanda Green from Alameda County, Sandre Swanson, my former chief of staff, his cousin. So she and those heroes and sheroes took down that plane in Pennsylvania, okay? And so I'm setting the stage because I was as angry as anybody. And I was as anxiety ridden. Some people were afraid. I was overwhelmed like everyone. We had all these intelligence briefings. We did everything to try to figure out what was going on. Okay, so what happened was people started talking, members started talking about retaliation. Okay, we have to bring terrorists to justice. I'm not a pacifist. I don't see the world through rose-colored glasses. But I'm a social worker, psychiatric social worker, and I know good and well in Psychology 101, you don't make hard decisions about anything when you're mourning and when you're emotional and when you're uncertain. And so they brought this authorization that was an overly broad blank check, and all it said was the president is authorized to use force forever, in perpetuity, just forever. And again, I couldn't believe it. And I spoke up in caucus. I tried to get them to narrow the jurisdiction, narrow the scope, be a little more specific, and to take a couple of weeks at least. No. So it was a hard decision for me, but I knew, and I talked to Pastor Smith. I talked, of course, to my mother and my dad, who was the first one to call me, the former military officer, 25 years, fought in 2 wars in World War II, supporting the Normandy invasion in the segregated 92nd Battalion in Italy. He fought in Korea. He was a proud officer. And he called me and said, that was the right vote. Do not send our troops in harm's way 3 days after this horrific attack, not knowing what the heck you're doing. So he was, and when he called me, I was, okay. So bottom line is, I went to the memorial service that day, and that's in the film, and knowing it was going to be a hard decision. But at that point, I heard the Pastor Nathan Baxter say, as we act, let us not become the evil that we deplore. I was settled, okay? I knew all hell was going to break loose, but I didn't know how, what, when. And I figured there'd be a few more no votes, but I didn't even ask because I finally got settled, forget it. So I voted no. And it was awful. Yeah, I mean, that was the right vote, but it was the right vote based on the constitutional requirements of Article 2 of the Constitution that members of Congress have to authorize the use of force. You don't just give it to a president and just say, take it and use it forever. You have to have them come back to Congress, whoever it is. And so constitutionally, I knew it was just crazy. It was wrong. But also I knew it was wrong based on my conscience. Yes. And understanding that violence begets violence. And of course, there are just wars. But you need to know what you're doing if you're going to engage in a war. And you have to make sure there's no collateral damage. You have to make sure that this is the only course of action. The use of force should be the last course of action, military action. And so I knew that was not the case in this instance. And I also knew that this could keep us in war forever. Yes. That we would have civilian casualties, that we would lose our troops, and that we should look at alternatives and have some heavy duty hearings, discussions based on whatever decisions we should make. And then again, as a psych major and psychiatric social worker, I knew that was not the most. 3 days, this happened on 9/14, 3 days after these terrible attacks, Congress acted. Come on. So anyway.
And when I think about the courage that it took to be that one, I love the way that's drawn out in the film, Abby, that one lone vote that was nay and everyone else was for it. That's an amazing amount of courage that I really think, people can build on as we continue to fight these battles with the wacky state of politics being what it is in DC now. So I was just so moved by that. My kids were small then, and I was so moved that you took this stand to protect them, to protect their futures, and not get us into something that turned out not to be good for any of us. It turned out not to be good for the people of Iraq and Iran. Nothing good was accomplished by that war. And I appreciate that you took the stand that you did, and I knew that history would bear you out, and it did. So
thank you. And now I've built enough support to repeal it. It's taken, dealing with these Republicans, it's taken 20 years, but I'm getting there. On Iraq, the Iraq resolution, it's right now on the floor of the Senate. And I'm trying to get that passed to repeal it. Hopefully, and we have 10 Senate Republicans. And on the 2001, we're making a lot of progress with that one too. Fantastic. And so finally, let me just say, I didn't see this as any act of courage. I didn't think that was courageous. I just said, this is something that my heart and my head say no to. And I talked to people, I read the Constitution again, I read the authorization, I prayed, I did everything I could do to come to this conclusion. Now, in looking back, I got so many death threats, it was awful, had to have lots of security. If anyone wants to go to Mills College and read about some of them, we got 60,000 plus emails, letters, phone calls, and I'd say 50% were all hostile. And maybe 60%. And then we have more that were really positive from people all around the world, thanking me and telling me that was the right vote, like from Coretta Scott King and Bishop Tutu. And I mean, it was like quite amazing. And then finally, because talk about hope and inspiration, I don't think this was in the movie, but I've shared this story. I was in South Carolina campaigning for president for Kamala Harris, our vice president. In South Carolina, man, lots of security, the whole bit. And this white guy, big white guy, came up to me with a little boy, and the security people and all just kind of watched. And I said, "Hello, sir." He wanted to shake my hand. He had tears in his eyes. I said, "This is kind of different, right?" And he said, "I want to apologize to you." He said, "I was one of those who threatened you. I was one of those who condemned you." He said, "I was one of those." And he just laid it out. And he's boohooing. And he said, "I brought my son here to see me apologize to you and to tell you how wrong I was." Now, this was in South Carolina. It wasn't even in Columbus or Charleston. It was out in the country. I mean, it was just really amazing. So I have a lot of stories like that. And so, so you talk about hope and inspiration. There's always that glimmer of hope somewhere that pops up. You never know.
I commented to my husband last night when we were watching the movie you enter spaces with a big smile on your face, a big hopeful smile, like you're there to change things. You don't see anything but what can be changed. Your time in the movie, and thank you for capturing this, Abby, but your time in the movie when you were walking through the encampments over on West Graham. It's hard to be hopeful when you're there because, as you correctly said, we shouldn't allow people in this wealthy country to live like that. But somehow you feel as you're walking through these spaces, and that's really every space that I've seen you walk through, you have this smile and this infectious hope, and that is so well captured in the movie that we can do something. We all can do something.
Yeah, and let me say this, that I think I didn't know this kind of going into it, and I'm not sure this is something that's actually obvious in the film, but I think that because Barbara, has a job to do every day on behalf of all of us, it makes me feel like, okay, well, what else can I do? Because it is what counteracts depression. The reason people are depressed is because they can't figure out what they're supposed to do. And so I'm really grateful for having kind of created a model of commitment and action and, advocacy, because there are things all of us can do. And if we're freaked out about the upcoming election, we need to go to the states that need us and put a little shoe leather on the ground there. But I do feel like Barbara is really a model of engaged action around a million different issues. And all we have to do is pick one to get ourselves out of whatever funk we might be in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that really, I think, was the thing that motivated me and inspired me the most, was just that model of engaged. Thank you for putting it that way, that model of engaged action. Yeah. I want to hear a little bit about your time with the Black Panthers. We just finished the unit with my kids at JJC about the Black Panthers. So I'd love to have some stories to go back and tell them.
Well, I tell you, the Black Panther Party for me, as a young Black woman, president Black Student Union at Mills College, again on public assistance, raising 2 kids, was the organization that I thought spoke to me. It spoke to the needs of my people. It spoke to women who are in the leadership in the party. It spoke to the love and concern for children and for our elders. And through the survival programs, which I participated in, I had my kids out there bagging groceries, right? I couldn't afford babysitting, first of all, or childcare, so they had to come with me, but they right now have this sense of consciousness that they never would have had they not been with me. And so I did a lot with the Black Panther Party. A lot of people don't even know about, because I just did it. Couple of examples. I actually helped write proposals to raise the money to get the Community Learning Center started on International Boulevard. I got paid through the Youth Project when I was a student, $500 a month to write proposals to raise money. Secondly, of course, as a student at Mills College, Elaine Brown, I worked in the admissions office, so we got Elaine Brown on campus to help her out.
Beautiful.
I was able to work and do book parties for Huey Newton. The Black Student Union did it. So I was able to bring a lot of people to the Black Panther Party to try to dispel some of the myths of the Black Panther Party. And I actually, I really love the party. I did the research for Huey Newton's book, Revolutionary Suicide, with Dr. Herman Blake, who's my professor. He's a phenomenal human being at Mills College. And then to top it off, before the Panthers were involved in voter registration, I actually went, a lot of people don't know this, I went to Huey Newton when I got involved with Shirley Chisholm's campaign at Mills and said, God, it would be great if you all helped with the Chisholm campaign. They had never done voter engagement, voter registration. And so I actually said, I want you to meet Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm. And this is not in the movie, but I flew to LA with Huey Newton and his security to introduce him to Shirley Chisholm at Diane Carroll's house. Diane Carroll had a fundraiser for Shirley Chisholm. So I ring the doorbell. Here I am with Huey Newton and his bodyguard. Maxine Waters opens the door. That's
wow. Wow. I remember being a little girl in East Oakland during those times, and when I became aware of who Shirley Chisholm was. We had never seen Black people in politics. And to see her, this woman who was unbought, what did she say? I'm unbought and unbossed.
Yeah.
And to think that she mentored you so that you could become the same when you went to DC. I mean, it's such an inspirational story.
It's something, and also what happened was the Black Panther Party got so engaged with her. They said, okay, we're going to register people to vote. We're going to organize. And they did a great job. We took, I think, 7 or 8% of the vote in Albany County. But bottom line is the organization had been developed through the Shirley Chisholm campaign. So Bobby Seale could run for mayor and Elaine Brown could run for city council. And they paved the way for the first Black mayor to be elected in Oakland, Mayor Lionel Wilson. So you talk about intersectionality and how everything kind of was tied together during that time. And I'm really humble about the fact that I played a small part in that. And I never even thought about it. Really, I haven't even really talked much about it until someone asked me about it.
And I just want to add, when I started sort of working on, getting the archival footage and so on, I did not know this story about the Black Panthers being involved in electoral politics. I was actually surprised. And then you start seeing the vote for this, and you start seeing the voter registration efforts, which Barbara had sort of helped kickstart. Then you really appreciate it. But that's one of the, let me just say, that's one of the fun parts of being a documentary filmmaker, is that you uncover stuff. You think you know something going in, but you're inevitably going to find other things. And this would be a big thing that I discovered, which, part of Barbara telling it and then finding the actual footage to prove it. Because the stories don't work unless you have the cover footage in a movie.
Yes.
You know what I mean? I had to have that footage.
Yeah, and you talk about COINTELPRO. I know a lot about COINTELPRO because I was targeted COINTELPRO. And the party members, what the FBI did to me is nothing compared to what they did to the actual members of the party. But my file is yay thick when I got it. And J. Edgar Hoover was a madman. He was a murderer. And he destroyed so much of what beauty and what progress was taking place during that period. I know a lot about that. The FBI's operation, and because
it's your next movie, Abby, that's your next movie.
That's possible. I know a lot of people who were victims of COINTELPRO.
Yeah. Wow. What I'm trying to do now is get that name, J. Edgar Hoover, with Bobby Rush off the FBI building. So
Wow, that's amazing. So when I hear you talk about this history of using the Black Panther Party to engage in electoral politics, I wonder what you think now. And this was a real, I heard this a lot during the last election, the last presidential election, where people my age and younger, I'm not all that young, would say, I'm not going to be bothered with the vote. And I've heard people in my children, I have a 21-year-old and a 23-year-old. I've heard people in their generation say, not going to be bothered with the vote because both sides are not that different, which could not be further from the truth. But we need a third party, or we need to do something that is outside of electoral politics. I'm wondering where your mind goes when you think of this history that you have.
Well, my mind goes back to what you just said about your kids. That's where my mind was when I met Shirley Chisholm.
Wow.
I had never registered to vote. She took me to task with her tough love little girl, and she convinced me. But I had a class at Mills and I was going to flunk. And the reason was we were required to do field work in these white guys' campaign, McGovern, Muskie, Humphrey, McCarthy, whoever was running then. And I told Dr. Mullins, flunk me. I ain't going to do this. It's no way. So didn't know Shirley Chisholm was running for president, but as President BSU, I invited her as the first African-American woman elected to Congress. She was the one to convince me. And so when young people say this now, I get it. Two-party system, please, I was a revolutionary. And
absolutely.
It's like the Democrats and Republicans, they don't mean much in terms of the differences, but there's a huge difference. And I'm a proud progressive Democrat. I'm trying to push the party to where it needs to be. And I think we're doing pretty good in terms of the progressive movement in this country. And so I say to young people, you're the future. You need to take over this party. And otherwise, if we third party, well, fine, if we can get a third party together. But until then, you can't not participate, because if you do, you end up with people like Donald Trump, a fascist dictator, or you end up with an autocratic move in this country. And believe you me, democracy is very fragile now. And in Trump's election, there were precincts. He won by 66, 70,000 votes. It was something really close. And one group did a drill down on who should have voted and didn't vote in certain states. Hey, there were a lot of young people, a lot of African Americans who did not vote, which is part of the calculus of how this man got elected. And so I'm saying to you, one vote matters, one vote counts. So please, I'm pleading for young people, not only register to vote, but get engaged and take this over.
Yes.
You don't want a party of them.
Right. It can only be representative democracy if we're represented in that democracy.
That's right. Yeah. That's right.
I'm curious, Abby, how would your film have changed had it been made post-pandemic in the year that was 2020?
Well, let me say this. I think there were, many sort of an embarrassment of riches in terms of what stories I would choose to tell. I don't think the film would have changed that much. I think the way in which the film did change post 2018 is that we had people like Ayanna Pressley and AOC in the film able to talk about standing on Barbara's shoulders. So that was a concrete change that happened in real time as I was making the film.
Yes.
I think this would have been a hard film to make during the pandemic. So I am really glad we were done by the time the pandemic hit us. And I don't exactly know how it would have changed. But I mean, one of the things that I, believe about Barbara is that because she's so close to the community that she represents and to the constituents she represents, she is always ahead of the curve of looking at and knowing what things are impacting the African-American community, particularly in her district, as a bellwether for what's going on in the rest of the country. So to the extent that COVID had some disproportionate impacts on African-Americans and Latinos here and across the country, that would have been in the film, and that would have been part of what Barbara was screaming and yelling about. So I just feel like there's, what Barbara represents to me is somebody who is sort of at the, whatever part of the ship it is where you're looking out onto the water and able to sort of see what's coming at us. And that's why I use the example of the HIV issue in the film, because she saw it first in Oakland and then she was able to bring attention to it. And by the time the country absolutely needed to respond to the impact of HIV on the African-American community, she had made it visible. And so that's, I've sort of, there's another issue in the film that doesn't get quite as much play, which is access for African-Americans who want to be part of the cannabis business. Barbara has, you see a woman thank her, but she's been at the forefront of that. The issue of African-Americans in tech. I mean, you name the problem, you name the discrimination, you name the racism, and you will find Barbara Lee having spoken out on it maybe yesterday or maybe last week.
Fantastic.
And so I just think, as our issues evolve, I mean, today, the issue of abortion is so critical because we see what the Supreme Court is doing. So I would have absolutely followed Barbara and her amazing personal testimony on the House. She testified in front of a House committee along with Pramila Jayapal and Cori Bush. That would have been in the film had it happened while I was making the film.
Can I just say something about the abortion issue right now? The Mississippi and Texas case, what's happening now is a tragedy as it relates to the possibility that Roe versus Wade could be eroded and dismantled. And it's going to impact Black and brown people more than anybody else. And so having said that, I co-chair the pro-choice caucus, okay? And I've been relentless in trying to end the Hyde Amendment since the mid-70s, the whole 9 yards. And a lot of my CBC members, it's kind of like, we're pro-choice, but there are other things that are top priority, okay? But I've been hanging in there, educating members, and all of the members of the CBC are pro-choice, except for one or two. But just recently, I led a letter to the president and vice president, signed by all members of the CBC except one, about the need to meet to talk about reproductive justice and Black women and the impact of Roe versus Wade and what we need to do to gear up for that. So I'm really proud of that. It was like one by one by one. And so the CDC, years ago, Shirley Chisholm was one of the first board members of NARAL, the National Abortion Rights League. Okay, nobody knows that. Shirley Chisholm in the early 70s, she was on the board of NARAL. And so I had to remind my colleagues that she led the way in terms of reproductive justice for Black women and women of color. And so, whew, I tell you.
Oh boy, do you get tired?
No, you know, Lisa, you
No
know
way.
that I ain't no way tired.
I love it. Come too far from where you started from.
Nobody told me the road would be easy. I know he didn't bring me this way, this far to leave me.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And just can I say one other thing that Barbara is the model of? This is what we've been talking about, which is perseverance. If it takes her 20 years to drag, you know, a few more Congress people across the line to vote the right way, she is going to do it. So I just want to say for all of those people out there listening, perseverance is a quality that she embodies and that the rest of us need to try to acquire for ourselves, because it's like, you know, we try something, it doesn't work, we get upset. Forget that you have to see this as the marathon, not the sprint.
Absolutely.
And for so many of these issues, I didn't think I'd be spending, you know, my last years refighting the abortion fight.
Not your last years, Abby.
Well, close to my last years, whatever these are. But here we are.
Your best years.
My best years. Okay, I didn't think I'd be fighting my best years on voting rights, you know, and abortion rights. And yet this is where we are. So just, you know, get the quivers out of your damn bow and put them in your bow and start firing them. We've got to do the work.
Yeah.
And that's what I've learned from Barbara is just, you know, some understanding of the relationship between perseverance, patience, and understanding that this is a long battle that we're all engaged in.
And an ongoing battle.
And an ongoing
battle. You know, I'm probably going to get the signal to wrap up pretty soon, but Barbara, I'd like to hear what you think, and I've often wondered this, about the Black Lives Matter movement and whether it has been effective, and if you see it growing into something that can really, I mean, you know, I think about the comment that Shirley Chisholm made about pulling a seat up to the table if they don't give you a seat at the table. And it strikes me that many young people are now building their own tables. They're making their own tables.
Listen, the young people in Black Lives Matter movement, they're leading, and I'm really proud of them. And they're making a big difference. You know, some of their positions may or may not be controversial, but who cares? I mean, that's them, and they're bringing these issues out to the forefront. And I know they're making a difference when I go to Concord and to other places where I see Black Lives Matter.
Absolutely.
Yards that I would have said, oh my God, really? I mean, and so yes, they're pricking the conscience, first of all, of the nation. And secondly, they're doing the hard work, and they're organized, and they worked like crazy in this last campaign to elect Senator Warnock in Ossoff in Georgia. They worked all over the country in these campaigns. And so I'm hoping that the momentum and that we support, which I do, their efforts in terms of running for office, in terms of voter registration, because that's the next level. They have got to, we have to have inside, outside strategies. Some never will run for office, that's fine. But I work with all of the movements on the outside so I can get my push on the inside to change the world, to try and change the world. So yeah, so no, I honor them. And I see myself in them. I see the Black Panther Party in them. You know, I just see them just being the next phase of our human rights, civil rights, and peace movement, which it's got to be part of. And I'm trying to make, you know, I'll finish by saying this because nobody knows. I chair the subcommittee on appropriations. First time an African-American woman or an African-American at all has chaired the subcommittee that funds everything around the world except for defense, right? Diplomacy. I'm funding a lot of humanitarian assistance for, unfortunately, Ukraine right now. Doing a lot. Embassy security. I fund development in Africa, the Caribbean, Central America. I'm working with the vice president on the Northern Triangle. And so what I'm laying this out because my budget, now defense is $740 billion. I have a budget that's $62 billion. So I'm trying to get, you know, reimagine reimagine our national security strategy. But I'm sharing this because I want to see more young people engaged with our global movement, okay, our human rights movement. I'm a representative to the United Nations from the House of Representatives. I have formed an NGO at the UN for Black people. And so I want to see African Americans more engaged in foreign policy, national security, and international affairs, because Africa is the upcoming continent. It's a young continent, the Caribbean, and just know they're looking to us to be their partners and their allies. And we have to, so Black Lives Matter movement and the young people, I want them connected more closely to the global struggle for all of these issues we're talking about.
Whew, I love it. Wonderful. Wonderful. So, I think I'm going to get the wrap up signal fairly quickly. I am. It occurred to me as I was preparing today that Benjamin Franklin quote, "This is a republic if you can keep it."
Yeah.
What advice would the both of you have for people my age and younger? And you've certainly spoken to that with the younger generation, but just everyday average people who wonder what they can do besides cast their vote. I've been active in Barack Obama's campaign and in President Biden's campaign. But, I want to be able to go back and give the kids, I tell my kids at JJC sometimes, and these are on my down days, you can do anything you want in this world. And some of them, are going to be carrying around pretty hefty convictions with them. I want to be able to back that up with some reality. Can you do anything that you want in this world? So what would you say to let's use my kids at JJC, for instance. What can you do once you're done with this engagement with the criminal justice system? What can you do to make this whole thing better? How can you help to keep this republic?
Barbara, take it.
Well, first, Lisa, you're doing it each and every day. And I think people need to understand their power. I think everyone, regardless of where you are in life, what you've done, find out what your passion is. Because I believe in the goodness of the human spirit. I believe that people are naturally good. It's systems that destroy people, okay, and make them evil. And so pull on what you think you could do, like Maya Angelou says, for humanity before you die. Find something, whether it's going to a food bank. I mean, it's like, come on, that helps. Again, what you're doing with young people, please. A lot of young people are really tired from the pandemic. Have group sessions with them. For those who have organizations, put them on as interns, find some money to pay them. For young people and for older people who want to help seniors, do that. I mean, it's like daily
everyone can do something.
Work that you can do to help somebody along the way is going to help. And the big stuff, just register to vote. If you don't like politics, find a nonprofit you work with. Do some civic engagement on whatever front. I mean, join a march. Poor People's Campaign having one here in June 18th.
Yes,
y'all come
I'll be there.
March. Yes. You'll be there. So I mean, look, don't think it has to be an elected official or you have to be doing something big on the policy front. Just every single day you can do something to help someone along the way. And as a person of faith, Lisa, that's what it's about.
Yes, absolutely. That's inspirational to me. And I just want to say thank you for the hope that you've infused in East Oakland, in all of Oakland and in Berkeley for all of these years, because I left East Oakland and went to UC Berkeley. So there you were following us, right?
That's right.
So thank you for the hope that you bring along with you wherever you go. And I'd like to finish up with you, Abby. What would you say to
Well, I agree. I mean, I think it really depends. It's like every community needs help right now. And so you don't have to look very far to figure out, you could look on like a next door kind of listserv to figure out what people are looking for and what kind of help you can give. You can go to your local library and read to young people who need to be read to. You can help an ESL mother who's trying to learn English as a second language and help tutor them. I have friends who do that all over the country. So there is a lot to be done, but I think one of the meta messages that this is speaking to is that we have to understand, I mean, it's the Ben Franklin thing. Democracy is not going to keep itself afloat.
Right.
It is going to require all of us to recognize how precious it is, to recognize that it is under attack, and to do something to strengthen it. And that that's really the call to kind of citizen action. And as Barbara says, it can be on climate, it can be on abortion, it can be on economic inequality, it can be on any issue. But if you're not fighting in some ways to save what is best about this country, we may watch it disappear in front of us. And that will not be okay when it happens. So absolutely. I just, I feel like, be like Barbara, get engaged, work for something that really matters for you. And if everybody in a community did it, we would all rise. Absolutely. It would float all the boats. And so that's what I would say. And I just, a shout out to Barbara and a thank you for, as I say, helping my mental health not go up the rails for the last 6 years. And I'm just incredibly grateful to you and the Albany Library. Thank you, Lisa, for, hosting us today. I'm an Albany resident. It really feels good to have my own library, recognize our Congresswoman.
Absolutely.
Yeah, say something about Abby, because I know for folks who know this film world, the NAACP hosts Image Awards every year. And this film that Abby did about yours truly has been nominated as one of the top 5 documentaries. Now, coming from the East Bay and
wow. That makes me so
really proud.
As a child of East Oakland and having watched Representative Lee for all of these years, that makes me so proud. As a Black woman, that makes me proud. As the mother of a Black girl, that makes me proud. That infuses me with just pride. Thank you both. Thank you for making yourself a subject of it. I was so inspired by all of it. Like I said, I watched it twice, back to back.
Thank you.
I did, and I'm looking forward to taking it back to my kids at JJC, to my own kids who are here, and seeing it get as wide a release as it possibly can. So thank you
so much. Nice seeing you.
Thank you for coming. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Thanks to everybody who are my supporters and my constituents. You all give me hope.
Remember to vote. Bye.
Remember to vote. Register and vote.